In my heart, I'm gonna sing till the Spirit moves. In my heart, I'm gonna sing till Jesus comes. I'm gonna sing till the Spirit moves. In my heart, I'm gonna sing till
racism, even in that. Not only in not saying that we are the true children of Israel, it's racism in that, in which they want to depict those that say they are Israel, because you got a lot of people that know a lot of so-called African Americans that understand that they are Israel. But the ones they want to focus on are the ones that are extreme, have a bunch of false doctrine, and the only thing they really actually know, and they halfway know that, is that they are Israel. So they want to focus on them. I remember I saw not too long ago something, I believe it was on VH1. I believe it was on VH1, and it was talking about angry black men, and it showed these Hebrew Israelites on the East Coast. Brothers and sisters, there are many people that know they are Israel and don't act in that manner of fashion. Okay? That are dealing with what's written in the scripture. Okay? But moving on. This is what Diab said about Herodotus. Okay? This is page 2. It says, Herodotus may be mistaken when he reports the customs of a people, when he reasons more or less cleverly to explain a phenomenon incomprehensible in his day. But one must grant that he was at least capable of recognizing the skin color of the inhabitants of countries he has visited. That's true. You don't have to be an historian to say, hey, these are black people. You don't have to be an historian to say that. But he would at least know that, even if he misunderstood some customs. Then he goes on to say, besides, Herodotus was not a credulous historian who recorded everything without checking. He knew how to weigh things. Then he goes on to explain how he knew how to weigh things. But that's the case, brothers and sisters. But see, it's so much racism that people don't want to even admit that the actual Egyptians, or the original Egyptians, were black. Because you have Arabs there now, for the most part. And even if you go deep into Egypt, you still have those original people there. Even some of them still there today. But they just not on the forefront. Okay, so let's go to into Egypt again with ships. Back to that book. Because even with the Sphinx, that shows you that the Egyptians were of African descent. Egypt is in Africa. Let's go to page 16. It says, of Into Egypt Again with Ships, a message to the forgotten Israelites or African Americans. It says, independent investigation of ancient Egyptian artifacts also proves that the Egyptians were black. See, if you look at the artifacts of the Egyptians, you see that these are black people. It says, for instance, the Great Sphinx of Giza is a compelling reminder of the Egyptians' blackness. The anthropologist Count Constantine Del Varney writes concerning this matter that when he traveled to Egypt, he saw black people with bloated faces, puffy eyes, broad noses, and thick lips. At first, he attributed it to the climate. But when he saw the Sphinx, which had the same black features, it became absolutely clear to him that the original Egyptians were black. He says, upon seeing the Sphinx, he remembered the words of Herodotus. As for me, I judge the Chaldeans to be a colony of Egyptians because, like them, they are black with woolly hair. He also confronts the irony in European contempt for blacks during his time, admitting that it was to black people that mankind owed the arts, sciences, and language. See, brothers and sisters, everybody has had their time to rule. The descendants of Japheth or the Gentiles rule at this current time. But prior to them, brothers and sisters, you had Shem ruling. Those that came out of Shem, Israel ruled. You saw the rise of the Arabs, who are also Semitic. They ruled. And then prior to that, who ruled? Ham ruled. The African nations ruled. You had the Ethiopians who ruled. And the Egyptians who had great, massive, huge kingdoms who ruled, brothers and sisters. So it says, in his book, this goes on further in this, on page 16 of Into Egypt Again with Ships, it says, in his book, The Negro, 1915, W.E.B. Du Bois writes that the Great Sphinx embodies black features with its high cheekbones, a large nose, and thick hair texture. Page 17 says, the controversy concerning the Egyptians as black has also been perpetuated by some of the Arabs who came to occupy Egypt. And again, that came many years later, even after the death of Jesus. It says, Over the years, there has been a concerted effort to destroy or disfigure artifacts which prove that the Egyptians were of African descent. John Lawson Stoddard, a writer and lecturer who was popular for his travelogues, affirms that it was Muslim fanatics who mutilated the head and face of the Sphinx. Okay, brothers and sisters? So that's who he attributes it to. It's a lot of legend and a lot of speculation about what happened to the Sphinx. That's what he said happened to it. And I've heard even other people who have made other accusations that, hey, the artifacts are being actually painted and changed. But when you look at them, it's no mistake that the Egyptians were black. Okay? And I make that point again because the Egyptians were black and Israel, they were mistaken for Egyptians. So if the Egyptians were black, Israelites had to be black. Even if you look at the miracle that Moses was to do to show the children of Israel so that they would believe. All right? One of them was, hey, you throw your rod down and it'll turn into a serpent, pick it up by its tail, it'll turn back to a staff or rod. Then the other one was like, hey, put your hand in your bosom and you pull it out and it'll be white like you had leprosy. And you put it back, it'll turn back to its natural color. Now, if he was white, what kind of miracle would it be if he had leprosy? His skin would just be a little bit more white. Even if he was a dark-skinned white person, or what's considered a dark skin for a white person, that's not much of a miracle. Okay? That truly isn't. But let's go to Genesis, the 45th chapter. Because he wasn't the only one that was mistaken for an Egyptian. This is Genesis, the 45th chapter. And we're going to start at the verse. It says, Then Joseph could not refrain himself before all them that stood by him. And he cried, Cause every man to go from me. There stood no man with him, while Joseph made himself known unto his brother. Now this is the story of Joseph, who was sold into slavery by his jealous brothers. And these are the sons of Israel, or Jacob. Okay? And Joseph was sold into Egypt. Well, he was sold to actually Arabs. And they sold him into Egypt. And there he had hard times. He even spent time in jail. But when the Pharaoh needed to know something, he was troubled by a dream. He had to go to who? He had to go to Israel. Because God manifested himself to Israel. And only Israel. So if you want to know what's going on, same thing with Daniel. You got to go to Israel. Same thing even until this day. If you want to know truth, you got to come this way. So he said, at this time, after he had put up kind of a charade, he said, hey, let everyone be gone from me. He made known himself to his brother, because his brother didn't know, after many years, they didn't know who he was. Why? Because he was a black man who had Egyptian garb, and he was speaking not through them, through their language. The scripture tells you that. They didn't even recognize their own brother. Now, had he been white, they would have known who he was. Had he looked like the person who says they are the Israel today, hey, they would have been like, hey, that was our brother right there. So when his brother came in, they would have known, hey, that's Joseph. They would have known. Because he would have looked quite different, but no, they couldn't tell. Because again, he had different garb, different speech, and he had the same color. Okay? But let's go to Acts 21. Because again, we have Moses mistaken for an Egyptian. We have Joseph mistaken for an Egyptian. And here we have the Apostle Paul mistaken for an Egyptian. It says in Acts 21:37, And as Paul was to be led into the castle, he said unto the chief captain, May I speak unto thee? Who said, Canst thou speak Greek? Art not that Egyptian, which before these days madest an uproar, and leddest out into the wilderness 4,000 men that were murderers? Aren't you that Egyptian? Now, brothers and sisters, some might say, now at this time, there had been miscegenation, there had been crossbreeding with the races. But brothers and sisters, the same thing, and that is true, they mixed in Egypt, especially after Alexander the Great. I'm going to read that to you. Okay? But one thing we must understand, look at all the crossbreeding, because I read to you that you would betroth the wife and another man shall label her. We know how prevalent rape and misuse of our women was during slavery, and even after slavery. Even after slavery, it occurred quite a great deal. By force. So you look at that, and people still know what part, even though we have these different variations of shade, we are practically all still considered a black people or brown people. Okay? It's not like, why? Because we had a darker skin tone. So even though it might lighten up a little,